In this episode, I'll explain NASA Administrator Bill Nelson's declaration of a space race with China. I'll also break down NASA's backup plan to help return stranded astronauts from the International Space Station. Welcome to the Undiscovered Country. Hello and welcome to the Undiscovered Country. I am your host, Bryant A.M. Baker. In this show, I count down the top 5 most important things happening in the world of space today. Let's get started.
Number 5.
NASA Administrator Bill Nelson has officially declared that we are in a race for space with China. In a recent statement to Politico, he said, "It is a fact we're in a space race. And it is true that we better watch out that they don't get to a place on the moon under the guise of scientific research. And it is not beyond the realm of possibility that they say, 'Keep out. We're here. This is our territory.'" Now, what's preventing China from doing this is Article 2 of the Outer Space Treaty of 1968. The treaty on principles governing the activities of states in the exploration and use of outer space, including the moon and other celestial bodies, which is also known as the Outer Space Treaty, has become the bedrock of international law concerning space. Article 2 of that treaty states that no part of a celestial body can be claimed or sovereignty established to include any part of the moon. Mr. Nelson seems to believe that even though China signed the treaty, that they might not agree with that legal prohibition anymore. Beijing has rejected some U.S. interpretations of the motives behind China's recent space push. Liu Pengyu, spokesperson for the Chinese embassy in Washington, told Politico that outer space is not a wrestling ground, and that U.S. officials had spoken irresponsibly to misrepresent the normal and legitimate space endeavors of China. But what do you think? Are we in another space race? And if so, is that even a bad thing? I would love to hear your thoughts.
Number 4.
Scientists at Caltech are launching a space solar power demonstrator prototype into orbit today as part of an effort to harvest solar power in space and beam that energy back to Earth. It being sent into space represents a major milestone in Caltech's space solar power project, which aims to deploy a constellation of spacecraft that collect sunlight, transform it into electricity, then transmit that over long distances wherever it is needed. According to Caltech, space solar power provides a way to tap into the practically unlimited supply of solar energy in outer space, where the energy is constantly available without being subjected to the cycles of day and night, seasons, and cloud cover. SSPP co-director Ali Hajimiri, who is also Caltech's professor of electrical engineering and medical engineering, told reporters that no matter what happens, this prototype is a major step forward. It works here on Earth and has passed the rigorous steps required of anything launched into space. There are still many risks, but having gone through the whole process has taught us valuable lessons. We believe the space experiments will provide us with plenty of additional useful information that will guide the project as we continue to move forward.
Number 3.
President Biden has signed the Consolidated Appropriations Act into law and finalized funding for the 2023 financial year. The act will see the disbursement of $1.7 trillion to fund the departments and agencies executing space programs. Of this disbursement, the U.S. Space Force received $26.3 billion. This tranche represents an increase from its $18.1 billion allocation for fiscal year 2022 and is also more than $24.5 billion the service branch requested. However, while NASA also saw an increase in allocation from its previous $24 billion, the $25.4 billion it received for the 2023 financial year was still less than the $25.9 billion the agency requested. Likewise, the Department of Transportation's Office of Commercial Space Transportation, which is part of the FAA, received $37.9 million in the operations account, the primary source of funds for personnel who conduct licensing and other regulatory activities. This represents $5.4 million more than the previous financial year, but less than the $42.5 million which was requested. Meanwhile, the Department of Commerce's Office of Space Commerce, part of NOAA, also received $70 million, a significant increase from its $16 million fiscal year 2022 tranche, but less than the $87.7 million requested.
Number 2.
It was announced yesterday that the NASA-funded Lunar Polar Hydrogen Mapper, also known as the Luna H-MAP, spacecraft did not make it into orbit around the moon due to a problem with the propulsion system. Luna H-MAP is a CubeSat that was a released payload that rode with the Artemis 1 spacecraft that sent an Orion test spacecraft around the moon in November. Engineers are currently trying to fix the problem to try to insert the CubeSat into its designated orbit around the moon. The 6-unit CubeSat was designed to orbit the moon with the aim to determine the amount of water ice in the permanently shadowed polar craters. Communication attempts to ignite the propulsion system failed, most likely due to a partially stuck valve. Although all other spacecraft systems are working well, the identification of water ice, especially at the poles where it is likely that large amounts are located, is a vital mission for the future of lunar exploration and utilization. Not only is water vital for human life and heavy to transport from Earth, it can also be broken down to hydrogen and oxygen to form rocket fuel, which would turn the moon into a vital way station to the further exploration of the solar system.
Number 1.
NASA is reportedly in talks with SpaceX about borrowing a Crew Dragon ship to ferry 3 people currently on the International Space Station back to Earth. The Soyuz MS-22 craft docked to the International Space Station sprung a leak in December, derailing a planned spacewalk and possibly the return trip of 2 Russian cosmonauts and 1 U.S. astronaut. The craft, which carried cosmonauts Sergei Prokopyev and Dmitry Petelin, as well as NASA astronaut Frank Rubio, into space in September, was slated to take the trio back home in March. If it's still out of order by then, Roscosmos says that it intends to launch the Soyuz MS-23 to rescue them. NASA, meanwhile, has a backup plan. An agency spokeswoman told reporters yesterday that, quote, "We've asked SpaceX a few questions on their capability to return additional crew members on Dragon if necessary, but that is not our prime focus at this time." It's unclear if NASA asked SpaceX about increasing the crew capacity of the Dragon currently docked to the ISS, or launching an empty capsule for the crew's rescue. But what do you think? Is this another demonstration of SpaceX superiority? Or is the US starting to rely too much on a single access point to space? Let me know your thoughts. Thank you for joining me. Links to all of the stories are in the description. Keep ahead of all of the most important things happening by watching the other recent episodes that I put together for you. I would love to hear your thoughts on everything I talked about here today. I am honored to be a part of this community of citizens in this undiscovered country of ours, and I'll see you again next time.